go ahead and call the Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, April 27th to order. And do we have any agenda additions or changes from staff?
We do. We have one addition, and this is a resolution from Claudine that I emailed you about just before this meeting, and it is for authorizing consent regarding the NPDES discharge permit.
Is this the approval of the thing we talked about at our last meeting?
Yes, exactly. It's so that, right, you or Evan can sign exactly an agreement that gets finalized that will likely be between this meeting and your next meeting and has very time sensitive issues. So this just authorizes you or Evan or both to sign that, whatever that document looks like, so they can keep moving on that. Okay.
I would be okay. I think I would be okay with this being into the consent agenda since we've already talked about it. Does that work for everybody?
Yep, that's fine with me. I think that's the right place for it, Andrew.
All right, so board member additions, changes, Amber?
I have two changes. I'd ask to move the memo for CVE out of the consent agenda as well as the minutes, both sets of minutes.
So how about we add the CVE portion to 5F and then the minutes as 5G?
Fine with me.
Okay. I'm just writing that down, so bear with me for a moment. The other request that I had is, so typically we do public to be heard and then we jump into business. Our first business item is going to end up being an executive session. So I wonder, board, would you be okay if we just switch things around? And if we do 5A, have our executive session conversation and then do public to be heard after that, especially as people are continuing to roll into our meeting. And I also know that the school board is meeting at the same time. And so a little extra delay for public comment may be beneficial in that sense.
Fine with me. I think you need to make a motion.
Yeah, I would hear such a motion. Someone wanted to make it.
Andrew, why don't you make it since you're looking at the agenda, and if I could recommend that, because I have to dial up the agenda and remember. So
I would move that item 6C become 5F, 6F become 5G, and 4A moves to right after 5A. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
And to add in the portion that Marguerite had mentioned into the consent agenda as 6, whatever the last one would be. If George's okay with that. Great, thank you. We're technical here. Any further discussion on that motion?
I think Kathy has her hand up. I don't know if it's relevant to what we're...
I was just noting that there was an addition from Marguerite. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
That was an aye for being in favor, right?
Yes.
George? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
All right, so that passed unanimously. And so with that agenda change, we are going to have public to be heard in a few moments, but first, the board, we are going to go into or have an executive session with our attorney. And so what we're going to end up doing is, first we'll have a motion, but we will leave this meeting and then we will come back. I don't know how long this is going to be, and I don't want to be off in my approximation for time. So public, I would just ask for your patience while we get through what we need to get through. And so I would make a motion that the trustees make the specific finding that general public knowledge of confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body would place the village at a substantial disadvantage. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Raj. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, and motion number 2. I move that the trustees enter into executive session to discuss confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1F to include the village attorney, unified manager, assistant manager, and director of recreation and parks.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, so for the public, again, we will be going into executive session and we will be coming back. All right, so I know that George was going to be a couple of minutes. I see Amber, I see Dan, and I believe Raj has also now joined. There he is. So with that, we will go ahead and come back into the meeting. So I will open back up the Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, April 27th. Thank you all for your patience as we had that executive session. For those of you who joined a little late, what we decided on was to have public to be heard now instead of before we did that. So now is a portion of the meeting where if there are any members of the public who wish to address the board on something that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. So please go ahead and if you're using Microsoft Teams, raise your hand, or type into the chat feature that you'd like to speak, and I will be sure to call on you. Okay, I am not seeing any hands going up. right,
Up at
here we
the
go.
top,
Yep. Harlan.
Andrew, this is Evan. Up at the top, Harlan Smith, because he's staff, it comes in at the top.
I appreciate that because I screwed that up last time. Thank you for pointing that out. Harlan, go right ahead. Floor is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to, quite a few meetings ago, I had brought up how the meetings were covered. And I've asked a question via email previously. And I'm curious if, I know that there's an open meeting law and I know that the public can attend the meeting, and I'm not looking to really block anybody from the meeting. I guess I'm more looking to hopefully have meetings stay on track a little bit at less than 4.5 hours. And I was curious if Robert's rules applied to these meetings, and if there was a conflict between Robert's rules and the open meeting law. I'm not looking for an answer now. I'm just kind of bringing it up as there's a lot of public in these meetings, and there's a lot of residents in these meetings. And I believe the meetings are directly related to the residents and not the public. So I would just encourage the board to, at some time, review Robert's rules versus open public meeting law. I understand it. Both of them can coincide together within a meeting. So that was all I wanted to bring up.
Okay. Thank you for that, Harlan. And as you said that you weren't looking for an answer, I'll take you up on that.
Correct.
Do you see,
Yep,
do you
I see Jen's hand.
Okay.
Yep, I see Jen's hand is up. So Jen, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I was wondering, and I'm not sure if this is going to be discussed or not, but I was watching the select board meeting, and there was some discussion about who will be deciding on how the village separates and who will be part of that conversation. And this might be what the last guy was kind of asking, but I guess I was really confused why, like, I'll just be blunt. I don't think that the select board should be at that conversation, that this is a trustees issue. This is a village issue. And, you know, we very clearly voted to walk away, and I think we need to do that like those conversations need to be within the village. Is this the right place to discuss that, or is there going to be a discussion about this later?
There is going to be a bit of a discussion on this in a little bit when we get to the work session. And the way that the work session is going to work, also I'll take it as a preview. The way the work session is going to work is we're going to have public comment beforehand, and then we're going to go into the work session. And during the work session, that's just going to be a board conversation. And we're going to then end the work session once we have completed that work. So things like what you're saying, that will be a great time to bring that up. You can say it again, or we've heard it now, and we'll be discussing that during that portion of the meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I do feel like you've heard me. I don't usually come to these meetings, but I was very put off by that part of that conversation. You know, like when you're leaving a relationship, right? Like you don't let the people from the other side of the relationship dictate what you do next. And I would like to advocate for us to just make a clean break and walk away and not share resources. That's all that I wanted to say.
Thank you for that, Jen. I appreciate it. And as I'm looking through, I see no other hands up. And so since there are no other hands up, I will go ahead and close the public to be heard. And we will jump into the first portion of our business item 5B, which is a work session on possible separation from the town of Essex. Brad, did you want to take this away? And maybe while you're introducing yourself or introducing this or getting ready to, I'll just again make a regular comment. If you are not speaking to the board, if you could please make sure you are muted so that we don't get any cross feedback, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Did you want to go ahead and take public comment now on the work session?
Maybe if you could go through sort of what we're going to be talking about.
Sure.
And then as to how.
That sounds good. There is a memo in the packet if people are following. Basically, tonight we are going to just have the first conversation with the board about separation and the process and what some of the goals are of the trustees as we start to explore this. And so hopefully we will look at some goals and some operating principles. We're going to look at the scope of work that's been outlined. We're going to talk about some community conversations and supporting a grassroots effort for the village to explore its future. And then talk about some community feedback opportunities as we move through this process, and then our plan for the May 11th work session.
Looks like Andrew's frozen.
Yep.
Yes, Andrew's frozen. He's coming back in.
Yes, I decided to Anna or Elsa that moment. Sorry. So I don't know what was last heard. So Brad, if you don't mind introducing what we're going to be talking about, so then that way the public can understand what the topics are, so then they would better know what to comment on.
Yep, and I think, did everybody hear me? I just went through those.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry, so you missed those. I let them know, Andrew, the things we were going to highlight tonight.
Okay, so if anybody has anything that you'd like to address on those items, now is a great time to do so. Please go ahead, if you're using Teams, and raise your hand or type into the chat feature, and we'll be sure to hear you. And one thing that I don't know if it was mentioned is with a work session, we don't take votes. This is just purely us talking and working on an issue, not necessarily making a formal decision on an issue. So I want to make sure you also have that frame as well. Okay, I see a hand up from Tim Kermer.
Hello. Can you
Hello,
hear me?
Tim.
Okay, yeah, so I'll try to be short. I haven't been to any of the meetings yet. I think I signed into Facebook or something saying, I support the separation. That's how I voted. So I would put my general support in for that, and that we should work through it. And I'm okay with sharing services, but it should be open to sharing from anybody. Maybe we want to share with Winooski. I don't know. It depends on what it is. You know, that we should be open to sharing because that's a good thing to do. It might be a good thing to do to economize, and it would depend on what it is we're going to share. So who knows what that could be. So and if it's with the town too, that's okay. It's we would become two entities, so they're just another town like any other town that we might share with any other municipal entity, let's say that, and beyond just towns, right? So I'm okay with that too. Whatever works out the best, we think is the best thing to do while we're drafting our the plans for how to do it. But yeah, just general support there. And then I'll have comments later, but it's at the it's like for the final item on the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Last call for hands. Melanie, floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. This is Melanie Toupé. I had a couple of questions, and they related a little bit to what I was listening to at the select board meeting last week. One was a comment, and I might not be accurately quoting it, but there was a comment about how committee members were, or heads of committees were appointed. There was it sounded a lot like accusation from those at the meeting that something hadn't been done correctly by the trustees appointing Brad as a head of something. So I wanted to just ask if you could address that. I don't know what I heard, and I'm not sure if I'm accurate, but I was hoping you could comment on that because it related to this. And then the other was I was hoping you could comment on how separation actually would work. I know that we're going to come up with a charter. I'm very much in support of that, but I'm kind of curious who's involved in the charter, who should be involved in the charter. I know that our separating, if it does go to that, will affect the town. And what needs to happen there? Like, what are we legally bound to do if this does move forward and go on the ballot for November? So I was just kind of hoping someone could address those overarching questions.
Yeah, so the first one of Brad. So when we talked about this at our last meeting, Brad is helping coordinate these separation efforts. And one of the reasons why Brad is doing it is because he is a village-only paid staff member. In addition to the many skill sets Brad brings to the table and to this conversation. So our municipal manager is somebody who is jointly hired, jointly supervised, and jointly funded by the Village of Essex Junction government and the Town of Essex government. And so as such, there may be times where there could be a internal conflict with that role, if you will, whereas Brad is just purely a great village employee. So that's why we have Brad helping us through these efforts, and I'm very thankful for that. In terms of the separation process, the way that I understand the separation process is we will put together a plan. The plan will have one of the things we're going to be talking about is how to get public input on the plan, how to get assurance that the public is informed as to what we're doing, but also a part of the development. Through some visioning and some more that you'll see as we get into that conversation. In terms of who will be participating in crafting the plan itself, one of the things, again, this is going to be discussed a little bit into the meeting. This is a village proposal. This is going to be a village charter. And so from my perspective, the village will put forth a proposal. Now, there may be times when we need to have a conversation with, let's say, the select board, or we may need to have a decision around something that we are currently doing together with the select board and or possibly another governmental entity as we go down that path. And when those items come up, we may need to have other people besides just the trustees making decisions, or at least helping to inform the decisions. I think one of the things so I think that gets at what your question is, Melanie.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, most welcome. And final call on hands. Seeing none, we will go ahead and jump into the work session. Brad, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'd like to start with some, I sent out a draft goals statement today and some operating principles, and I wonder if we could look at that as a group, just to see if we can, if that's hitting the right marks, and if people want to wordsmith anything. Marguerite, I don't know if you have that and can put it up on the screen.
I do.
Oh, fantastic. So you all provided some really great feedback, and so I tried to extrapolate some thoughts and incorporate a little bit of some commentary from each of you and try and put it all together. So what I'd like to do in this first part is just to kind of identify, what these work sessions or what this process is going to be called, and then look at the goal statement and the how we'll get there statements. Do you want to start? Where do you want to start, Andrew?
So right now you're asking for us to come up with a name for the initiative or
well, let's go through the goal and
yeah,
how we'll get there, and then we can return back to the name.
sounds good. For me, I like the sound of the goal. I think that it aligns well with, frankly, the intent of what we're doing, but also the heart and soul values that were identified years ago. I think that sounds good.
Any other trustees want to comment on the goal?
No.
Okay.
I think we're good.
And then in terms of how we'll get there, do folks want to just look through that real quick?
Those are all things that I can agree with, and I think will help to ensure that we have a smooth process.
Yeah.
Any board members have concerns or changes?
I think it looks good.
Yep.
I think we're good, Brad.
Okay, great. And so, just Andrew, we went back and forth, I think, with staff and Andrew trying to figure out what should be the title of this line each time on the agenda. And so I think it'd be good to come up, have a consistent work session on, I think where we ended up tonight was work session on separation and the future of the village. I don't know if there's, looking at the goals and the process, if there's a more concise way to say that. But I'm open to suggestions.
How about Essex Junction independence?
Thoughts or comments from others?
Sounds fine.
Fine with me.
Okay. So I think we have a complete document now, and I can resend that out. I know we're not taking any votes or anything during the work session, but Andrew, do you feel, or do we all feel like we have consensus on these, so that if we needed to come back at some point and say, hey, remember we established those goals and we all five of us agreed, everybody feels like this is a good way to get there and a good goal to be seeking?
I like it, Brad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Looks good to me.
Great. So next, if we look at the memo, I've kind of outlined the 5 major bodies of work. And just to summarize, first is the charter. And as I said, I think you all are very well versed in charter language and process. And so, but that's certainly something that we'll want to get started on, just outlining kind of the shell of the organization. Once we have the charter process going forward, we'll want to start to look at the organization and the budget. What does a potential organizational structure could look like for the village, and what would be the financial implications? What do our external relationships look like? I think it's really important as we go through this process to always say could. When we're presenting numbers, I think right now we would be using FY22 numbers because they're real numbers. It's going to be really hard to guess into the future because there are so many unknowns. And ultimately, you all will hire a manager who, as we all know, is eventually the one who makes a lot of these decisions. So I think what our task is to say, here's what it could look like, here's what we want it to potentially look like. We can have discussions about creating MOUs or interlocal contracts if we think that's a better way to provide certain services for the government. But ultimately, you will hire a manager at some point who will make these kinds of determinations, and a budget will be put forth by to the community, by you all, and for the community to vote on it. So I just want to, be clear about that up front. Third, we have working with the select board, and that question just came up earlier from Jen Ellis. Certainly there's been a great recognition on all of your parts that we do need to work with the select board. We will work with the select board. We certainly, I think, have an initial interest in talking about police services, but certainly we want to talk about the assets and a transition and a timeline. Ideally, this process will result in both boards recognizing that separation is going to occur and that both groups can plan for it and work amicably to get there. The last two things, listen to the village residents. I think people, you have some really great participation in your meeting tonight. I think it's an indication that people are very interested in this topic. You have some really excited people in the community who want to, that I think we want to tap into and utilize. And so we want to create a lot of feedback loops for us to hear back from residents. And then lastly, of course, is if we're going to, take this thing to a vote by November, we just really want to make sure that we educate and inform people. And we want to provide as much clarity about what's happening and what separation means. And I think you all appreciate that and did some great work in the merger work to get a lot of information out to the community. And so I think, again, you're well versed in it, and we'll want to replicate a lot of those things. That's the scope of work. Any questions on that or comments?
Yeah, I have a bunch. Okay.
You can go ahead, George. It's fine.
Yeah, I have a bunch of comments. Could you scroll back up a little bit, because I'm fine with number 4 and 5, but and Brad, I appreciate the work. I appreciate the effort, but if I'll do a little dialogue here, and then I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I would kind of disagree. I think we are creating a new document. Our document, I think in my suggestion, I think we would cannibalize the existing village charter, and also, but we kind of updated a lot of things that are in the charter in the merger charter that the village approved. And I think there were a lot of good things in that charter that are pretty substantive, and there's a lot of just fairly significant differences. For example, creating a DRB and getting rid of the zoning board, which only has 1 or 2 meetings a year and sometimes no meetings. And so, I mean, I don't want to go on digress, but I think we're going to do, I think the work on the charter is going to be so substantive. It's more than, it's like heart surgery, brain surgery, and also replacing the lungs. I think at what point you just say you're doing a whole revision. That's not a big deal. And you are correct. I think we can proceed fairly quickly with that because we've gotten done doing that for 2 years. The organization and budget is, again, this looks like maybe a little too ambitious to me. Please keep in mind, and I'm just saying this, throwing this out there, I'm not trying to tell everyone what to do, but I think realistically, if you're going to have a charter in front of the voters in November, that means you're going to have it done in a full-blown proposal pretty much by October, which is what, 5-6 months away. A complete rehab. I mean, the organization and budget looks like a little too much of a revision. I think we just potentially mostly just look at our status quo. I haven't heard anyone complaining about our municipal services locally here in the village, and I don't think there's been any big push over the last few years to do a total restructuring of our service delivery models and our financials. I think we would here. I would look to try to my suggestion. I would look for more of a maintaining the status quo as much as possible to do the least amount of work necessary, because you got a ton of other things we have to worry about. Number 3, and I don't want to ramble on, I'll stop after this. So, but I think number 3 is where I have the biggest issues, because we have so many other relationships with the town. And I hear people saying, we want to just have a clean divorce, or, treat the town like any other town. But I just don't. I think the extent of our relationships with the town that we've developed particularly over the last 10 years, I think some of us on the trustees understand these. We have Stormwater Committee, we have the Tri-Town Committee, we have shared services that took a long time to set up, and that have saved both sides millions of dollars that would be really foolish to unravel. So I think each and every one of those things we're going to have to look at. It would be a disservice. They're not going to stop separation from going forward, but if it benefits us, and if an existing agreement benefits us and benefits the town, and it would save us both sides money post separation, why in heaven's name would we want to dismantle it? I think I understand, and I'm going to anticipate some public comments that just we don't want to get too involved because separation, we could get sidetracked. I think listening to the select board, I think they understand that we have a mandate. They got a mandate from their voters in the town outside the village last year, and they took it very seriously. So I think they understand we have a mandate, and they understand that this is going forward. And I don't think they're seeking to derail anything. But I would like to see a pretty big, not so much work with the select board, but I think a lot of the other things that I think it needs an A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I think it needs a little more work. I'll stop there.
So in terms of what the scope of work that you have here, with the charter itself, I don't disagree that we have a lot already, and that we can take from one, put it into the new, or put it into the existing. However we go about that is fine. I think we have the overwhelming majority of what we need for that. In the organization and budget, I think that this is important in the sense that if we're going to ask the community to vote on separation, we need to understand what the new Essex Junction would be. Is the Essex Junction going to be a $5 million entity? A $15 million entity? I'm assuming somewhere in between that number. But there's a ramification on us as residents where that range is a little too broad, and so we need to narrow that down to better understand what we're talking about when we're talking about the independence of Essex Junction. And for me, with the work with the select board, I don't see this as the all-inclusive list. I see this as the start. George, some of the things that you've said, yes, like the Tri-Town Committee, for instance. There are some levels of detail that I think are just beyond necessity for this scope of work. So I don't disagree with you that we do need to talk with the select board on more than just police services. But I think it's a level of detail that's just a little bit beyond a little bit more than we need right now. Can you go down to the next ones? Yeah, I didn't have anything to change with these.
Andrew,
yeah.
Yeah, I'll lower my hand. I don't want to get to, I know other people want to talk, but to go back to the charter, I guess the point I'm trying to make is this. You're creating a city, you're going to have a city council. So are we going to have a mayor? That's one of the questions. Do you want to have a weak mayor or a strong mayor? If you have a weak mayor, that means you have a strong manager. If you have a strong mayor, you have a weak manager. If you look at the existing village charter, huge section of it covers the powers of the manager. So depending on what form of government you have, you could do a pretty substantial revision of what's in, it could look very, very different than what's in the village charter now. Those are important decisions that are going to have to be made fairly quickly before we get into the business. That's a sort of a political community decision. I'm not really sure how you're going to have time to ask the community that question. I'm not sure how we're going to answer that question, frankly, right now. I'm sure we'll figure it out. But how you answer that question has a lot of impact on what happens in the text of the charter. I'll stop. I'm not trying to make things more complicated, but I'm just also trying to get. This is. I don't want to oversimplify something that I think is that could be a little more complex than what it appears to be here.
Yeah, I think it may be fair to say that, Brad, please correct me if I'm mistaken. To me, when I think of a scope of work, I think of the scope of work as a 5,000-foot view. And so from where we are, this is a 5,000-foot view of the things that we need to do. Down to the 5-foot level, yes, we need to figure out, are we having a local options tax? We need to figure out, the mayoral system or not. We need to then figure out within the finance department, are we going to contract out payroll or are we going to have payroll done in-house? Those types of things are so far below the 5,000-foot view that I think it's really, again, just beyond where we are today. But yes, things we do need to talk about.
Yeah. Go ahead, Raj.
No, I was just descending to about 1,800 feet, and I'm climbing back up at a pretty good rate now, something like 800 feet a minute. So I'm going to level back off at 5,000 and circle. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And George, I agree with you. I mean, I agree with everything you said, and all of it is going to be on the table at some point. This is really just, these are the 5 pieces of work that need to happen between now and November. And we know the process even goes beyond November. But these are the conversations that I think we need to have. And yes, do we need to talk about form of government and number of elected officials, and do they come from districts or are they elected at large? Yeah, there's all of this is deep. This is just kind of very tertiary tonight, a quick first work session. Here's our scope of work. Here are the 5 things that I think we need to tackle.
Okay. One of the things I'm taking away from, I'm taking away from this conversation so far is there's a lot of desire to jump into the weeds. And I hear that, and frankly, I'm right there with you. I want to get to answering some of these questions. Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, Brad or anyone else, what's the thought? I have my own thoughts, but what's the thought on plan of attack on some of these things? Because I don't think of them as a 1 through 5 list. I think of them more as maybe more of a Venn diagram, but they're so interdependent. And I guess that's a little much for tonight, potentially our first hour, but and I guess that's my eagerness to sort of get into the weeds, but I'm very curious, about how we're going to approach some of these items, and looking at a list that I've come up with of all the things that I'm wondering about, and sort of mentally placing them all over this list, and then comparing them to our timeline. It's going to be a lot. And I sort of feel like, an early step would be to really start to throw those darts at the board and see what has to wait and see what's critical. What do we need to get done to get our community moving forward by November, and what decisions potentially can wait? And I'm not saying that we have to necessarily make anything wait yet, but we've had a lot of input about the fine detail of some of this scope, and I'm excited to do the work, but it's also daunting. So yeah, I guess I don't know when, Brad or Andrew, when you envision kind of diving into process, if that's the next meeting, or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's next time, Raj, and I think for next time I'd like to come back with kind of an outline of a timeline to see if it resonates with what you all are thinking and to massage that a little bit, and to start to get into those weeds of is it going to be are two people going to go work on the charter and come back to the large group? What kind of conversations do we need to start for organization and budget? Let's look at that next time.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that I agree with George as far as what looked at. Things like you said, Andrew, just 5,000 per share. You this whole thing, but I see one thing is obviously the select board and having communications with them. I'm glad that we're doing this as just village only, and surely I'm open to listening to other people. I don't want to get to a substantive conversation or commitment in any way with the select board at this stage. I think we should be kind of figuring out how we want to proceed, like Raj was saying, and what we may want to, talk to the select board and see if we can broker agreements. As you said before, amicable, make this as amicable as possible. People are likening it to a divorce or a couple splitting up. And when you do so, both parties have lawyers and it gets, difficult, but you try and see what you can share and you can come to an agreement, make it easier. Judges don't like to deal with divorces, and I'm sure the legislature or government ops doesn't want to deal with a contentious split. But so whatever we can do to make this as smooth a process and amicable a process or future for both communities.
All right, take it away, Brad.
So if, mostly I wanted to review that. It doesn't sound like anybody is saying, hey, there's something missing. I mean, I get that the details are missing and intentionally, but the big picture here of these kind of 5 bodies of work sounds like people are on board.
I would agree, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to look at was just to present a quick snapshot of potential budget. These are educated guesses, so they're not totally out of thin air. But I did want to, just talk about expenses. There's a memo from Sarah about where some of this potential funding could come from. Evan was also talking about looking into some other ideas. So here's her initial thoughts of where some funds are available. Basically, we're going to be looking at both FY21 and FY22 as we cross over in July. And so these are some identified sources of funds that we could tap into. And the budget, was projected at, mid 40s to low 60s. Obviously, give or take. There were some assumptions made in there, like that you would want to create an information booklet similar to the Greater Essex, that you would want to mail that booklet, that you would want to have a community-wide summit, that you would want to have a special election this year. So obviously, any of those decisions or other decisions could change the budget.
And so again, for a frame, this is just to put it in front of our eyes now, but just as a thought for down the road, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not making any decisions or whatever. I know that the idea of figuring out a budget was going to come up and where those monies are going to come from. So this is just getting out ahead a little bit.
Appreciate that.
So if we scroll to the next part after budget on the memo, we've already talked about the process, Andrew, in terms of the public providing feedback at the start of each work session, and then if they have comments on things that we discussed during the work session, that they can email the trustees. I also, I didn't include in the memo here some information about some other feedback loops that I'd like to plan for. I'd like to put a survey up available each day, each Wednesday after your meetings, to offer the community feedback form. Basically, name, email, address on a scale of 0 to 10. How well do you think the process for creating an independent Essex Junction is going? What did you hear that you're excited about? Did you hear anything that you're concerned about? Do you have any comments, feedback, or suggestions? And do you have any questions? So if the trustees are okay with that, we could put that out there tomorrow. There's obviously lots of people here at the meeting who may have feedback, and we would certainly welcome it.
I think that's a really interesting idea. And even after this process, I'd kind of be curious to see how that would play out just after a regular trustee meeting. Go ahead, Raj.
A couple questions. How would we ensure, I'm assuming the name and email address would ensure that we're hearing from village residents, but how can we assure our residents that that information won't be sought and used as it has been in the past?
Which information, Raj? The
names and email addresses as public records, as records requests.
Yep.
Do we have another method where we can verify, probably not for free, but do we have another method where we could use that would allow village residents to be the ones that participate and not open them up to that sort of abuse?
Yeah, I was weighing those options and erred on the side of, I actually have, it's a Google form that you have to put in your email address, and it automatically sends you a receipt of, in case somebody used somebody else's email. So I think the public would just need to understand that this information is public information, and that's the nature of the comments and feedback that they're providing.
So maybe what we could do is just put something on top for them every time, and then give them an alternate way where they can, well, I guess that's still going to be public too.
Exactly.
But more difficult to find. I mean, you can't, so just let people know that their how much of their communication, if it's just their information, their demographic, their name and address or whatever, or let them know also if their comments are discoverable.
Yep.
Just
Sure.
so they're aware, because we've seen that happen in the past, and it's unfortunate.
Yep, no problem.
Can I say one thing, Andrew? My concern is I want to be transparent as possible, but obviously I don't want to subject our constituents to a barrage of public information requests or FOIA requests, and to stymie the process, or to keep people from opening up. Obviously, if they want to have a verbal conversation, meet with somebody, I'm more than willing to meet with anybody and sit down, talk to them in person. And as far as where we go from there, it's what's said or whatever.
Thanks, Dan. Go ahead, Evan.
Just to be cautious, when you collect people's names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, they can become public information. So just let's just be mindful of that. That's all. Just be mindful if you're collecting information. If you are using some other site that we don't have access to that information, but only the results, then we don't hold that record. Thanks.
And Brad, I just want to say, I think it's a great idea. I didn't want to put any kind of downer on the idea. I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a nice idea. I just think we need to think about what information we're holding and what's a record. So Brad, we can talk about that.
Sure. I think it's mostly being driven by the expediency of the work that you guys are about to do. That, as somebody already said, there's just not going to be opportunities to do community surveys or forums or like we might normally. So at least this would be a way for regular, immediate feedback. But certainly we can clarify the language that's on there so people understand that it could be a public that it could become a public record, that the information that they're sharing, and provide them with other avenues for communicating.
Sounds good.
Okay. Andrew and I had briefly talked also in terms of feedback loops about writing specific summaries of just this work session portion of each meeting. And then distributing those and also disseminating those to village staff. I think that was evident in your surveys that it was important to make sure that village staff are kept abreast of this, of what's happening and included as much as possible to at least be sharing, the work that we're doing each time with them, as well as the community. And lastly, I'd just like to, kind of permission to start carving out space on the website to host all of this information. I think it can be done just at essexjunction.org unless you all prefer to create a new website. But otherwise, I think we could find a page and create a link right on the homepage so that people can start to find information.
I think that makes sense to just use the Essex Junction website.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So the next part of the memo talks about the timeline. I don't think we want to get into the weeds tonight, but this is kind of a general approach. And again, I'll provide a more detailed timeline at the May 11th meeting. But basically May and June to start the charter development conversation, June and July to do some of the organizational budget stuff and be talking with the select board. And then August, hear back from the community conversations group. We're going to talk about that next. And then in September, October, we'd have a village summit and start the public hearings process, the warning of the vote, and ultimately a vote in November. So again, I know there's lots more that goes into it. I know there's all sorts of statutes about when those things need to be warned and take place. But this is kind of the timeline, the general timeline that we're on. And next time we can look more in detail and talk strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next piece is community conversations. And, as I said earlier, you have a lot of really great people in the village who have some energy and passion around this, around our future. And I think we should tap their energy and their expertise and allow them to really start to kind of develop, similar to the Heart and Soul work, develop some village-specific, village-centered values and a vision for the future. And also start to capture and any concerns or that residents are having about separation so that those can be addressed. And so I've put in here a suggested budget of $10,000 for a grassroots community-led effort. Elaine Haney has volunteered to chair this group. If we are able to allocate the funds, they could, that group could start their work next week. And really be doing this work kind of tangential to you all who, if you're all focused on kind of the organization, budget, charter, this group really focuses on the energy of the village and doing pop-ups and interacting with people in fun and cool ways, especially over the summertime. The key for me is that, ultimately they will come back and present to you at the end of August. That you all will welcome their report and information and be willing to act on it. If at some point, they come back and this charter has been developed and this organizational plan's been developed, but the community vision and values aren't aligned, that we work to align those documents. And if we do that at the end of August, I think we'll still have time to make that happen. So looking for consensus on allowing this group to move forward and allowing them to have access to money, which would be done through the rec department.
And those my only quick question, those funds, the community events are within the rec budget already, correct?
They're separate
All right.
from the rec budget, but they're in the budget, yeah.
They're within the general fund, but.
They're in the general fund in the economic development line, yeah.
Great. Raj, I think you were first, then George.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. My only question is, you know, so much of what I consider the folks putting together the charter and some of the organizational material, the plan for the village will depend on the results of the community conversation. And you know, for instance, if I'm one of the two that is working on the charter, I would want to have a more coordinated approach with the folks doing the community conversations so that maybe some of those conversations align with where we are in terms of the process. And I'm not saying that's what has to be done. I would just love to hear later, another time, if there are possibilities there to sort of align some of the conversations with the topics we're working on at the time. So if we're starting the charter and we get to the, oh, we got to figure out governance. I mean, we can wait on the governance part and move on. If we know sort of, you know, the last 2 or 3 weeks of July, and this is just a hypothetical, that the community conversations will focus on what does the community want to see? Do they want wards? Do they want a weak mayor? You know, because going back and redoing the charter after spending all that time doing it, to align a governance structure, I would sort of rather see if it's possible from the folks that are going to be doing this, if there are ways to align the work. Does that make sense? And again, not tonight, and maybe not next time, and maybe not every time, but you know, just, and I don't know how much coordination we can do, but if there are ways to sort of, you know, I'm going to use the S word, synergy. If there's some synergies there, that'd be great. That's all.
Great. Yeah, and let me, if I could just comment on that, Raj. I think the efforts of that group, well, first of all, those people are going to be in these meetings, I think, and are already actively a part of the conversation, if not just listening. And so I think naturally that will occur. I think we could have that, you know, we could have Elaine come to some meetings to kind of do some check-ins. It's just really important that it's an autonomous group and they can work independently. I think the other piece, though, of that is, I don't think that's the primary focus of their work. I think the trustees are going to have to figure out the form of government and figure out how to get feedback on that. Now, if we can do something with that group, I would agree. But I don't think it's the charge of that group to figure out, do you want a weak mayor or a strong mayor? I see their work as much more visionary and not in the weeds. And so I think for any of that weedy stuff, it's going to have to, you know, we as a group are going to have to figure out how you want to get feedback and what kind of loops we can use to figure those kinds of questions out. Districts, wards, I don't think that's going to be the focus of this group. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Well, I mean, we'll keep going.
Yep.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I would say I'd have a little bit of concern about this group if anyone other than Elaine was not involved with it. Elaine is the perfect person, and the reason I'm saying it is because this people in the community are going to hear us talking, and they're going to say, "Why? I don't understand. Why are things? Why do they have to do this? Why do they have to do that?" They're going to have questions, even though you want to listen to what they have to say. They're going to have questions about the process and about what they're hearing us say. And Elaine, having been on both boards and knowing both governments intimately and knowing the process intimately, will be able to address those questions. So that provides me a lot of comfort here, because otherwise, if it was just community members who didn't have someone who had some acquaintance with government process and the charter process, it would be a little concerning. So I think this is fine. I think it's great. I'm glad that Elaine has volunteered to do it.
I like this process a lot better than my original idea. So thank you, Brad.
Great. So is there consensus from the group to reallocate those unspent community events monies to support this grassroots effort?
Well, it's kind of a community event, isn't it? Yeah, it's a community event, so it sort of fits the, it's along the same lines.
It does.
I'm not concerned about it.
Okay. Great. So we're about 5 minutes away from the first hour of the meeting if we don't include our executive session time. So the last thing I had on our agenda for tonight was just to briefly discuss the plans for May 11th, the May 11th work session. And what I had on there for us is to review with the attorney and talk about the charter process, to invite our legislative reps to have a conversation with them, to look at a more detailed timeline and talk a little bit about strategy, and ultimately talk also about the vote and the costs and plan of that. And out of that charter conversation, I hope at least we can generate a list of the big items that are up for consideration. I think George, you're the one who said that charters in generally are kind of boilerplate and bland.
Yeah.
But there are some big picture questions, as you already talked about, form of government, districts are at large. I think to outline, those 3 to 5, maybe 7 things of the big picture things that we want to talk about, really get into and have some community input on, just to at least establish that list.
Sure.
I think that sounds good, Brad. And one of the things you were talking about having sort of like a feedback on how this meeting went, maybe that can be a continuous question is, as of today, what are your thoughts on a mayor? What are your thoughts on, and or what are your concerns with? Because I feel like one of the things is I've, just going to that mayor specific thing, a few people I've spoken with have said, but I don't want a Mayor Weinberger. Does that mean we're going to need both a mayor and a manager? So I think if we can understand what concerns there are and start to get at that now, I think it can be more helpful as we go down this road and help inform where we go.
Great. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, maybe it's getting into the weeds, but discussing where we go from here and splitting up maybe some of these agreements we have, the MOUs we have with the town right now. Right now, we hire out engineering services through Rick Hamlin. And the town, as members of the town, we also pay for services to have an engineer on staff. That may be something to look at as far as cost savings down the road. There's so many things to look at. And if we are going to continue look at anything beyond police services, which I think we really should look at, where we could actually save money for our community and explain to them why we want to do so, and also be a mutually beneficial agreement with the town. I think we should be doing that. And otherwise, I'm open to suggestions.
Great. I think we're good. That's all I had on the work session. I know it's a lot, and I know we all want to get into the weeds, and most of us in this room could probably sit down for 5 hours and talk about all this stuff and would enjoy every second of it. So we'll get there, and we'll just kind of keep chugging along. I do anticipate. Sorry, I did have one other thing. I would like to. Well, we can plan, but in the future, I think we need to have a full day retreat with the trustees, and thinking sometime in mid-June. To really sink into some of these and have that multi-hour conversation. So we'll be planning that at some point soon. That's it.
We're going to have some fun.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you for helping us see this through.
Sure.
Thanks, Brad.
So trustees, anything else before we go to the next agenda item?
No, I'm good.
Great, Brad, thank you again.
problem,
So
thanks.
going to 5C, a discussion of potential action on the letter from VTRANS regarding the Essex Junction crosswalk beacons. Who was going to take this one?
Well, I mean, I asked the last meeting for it to be brought up. But I'm not sure if I'm the one to introduce it.
Yeah, why not? Why don't you give it a shot, see how it goes?
Okay. So hopefully Micah and or Annie are here. A couple months ago, the village put in a grant request for some rapid reflective crosswalk beacons, flashy blinky lights. We did not get the grant. We got some feedback, which was great for next time. Part of this was the result of a petition to identified a troublesome intersection at Main at, I believe it was, I think it was Prospect. I might be wrong.
Pleasant.
And yeah, and so at any rate, that need is still there. We have a quote for 2, and I think we have some funding sources. And it was my hope that we could work with the Bike Walk Committee's budget. It looks like Sarah has identified a way we can move some funds into the next fiscal year and leverage their next year's budget as well. And it was my hope that the trustees would do all 3 that were originally intended, with the grant anyway, by taking some of both of those portions of the Bike Walk budget and then backfilling either with economic development funds or matching grant funds. And I don't know if, I believe Micah might be here and he can speak to his committee's comfort level with how much of their budget they want to use towards this and how many of these they feel are necessary. I think the quote we have is for 2. So Micah, are you in the meeting right now?
He is, and his hand is up.
But his microphone is off, and he's asking me separately if we can hear him. But I don't hear you, Micah.
It does show that you are unmuted.
If you want, Micah, you can tell me what to say. I remember the meeting also, but I will wait a second if we can help you. I see your microphone is off. On.
So as the trustees can see, the current fiscal year WAC budget is $7,000. None of it's used. Next year, we upped it to $10,000. And I guess my question for Micah is, does the Bike Walk Committee have any plans for that budget? Would they like some left over? Certainly, between this fiscal year and next fiscal year, they can cover 2. But we'd love to hear their feedback.
Since Micah is unavailable or is unable to speak at the current moment, and when he comes back, because I think it looks like he has temporarily left the meeting, Annie, I'm assuming, were you at the last meeting, and or would you be possibly equipped to speak on his behalf for now?
So just for clarity for the public, I am on the Bike Walk Advisory Committee. Micah is our chair. And I'm not as confident to speak to next year's budget as Micah will be, but I think is he here now? Is that him?
He's here. Just let him in.
Micah, why don't you go ahead and
now we're able to hear me?
Hey, we've got Micah.
Okay, much better. Sorry about that.
Go for it.
Yeah, so for this fiscal year ending in June, we have a $7,000 budget. At this point, I was planning on using that to purchase 1 beacon, go ahead, get that, use the budget, and close out the year with that. Raj, you had raised this possibility of other funding being a potential, or maybe of rolling over into the next year. So I'm really just looking for the feedback from the trustees of what do you want me to do? Because I've gotten kind of mixed feedback between rolling money over into next year and trying to go after additional grants, or that, no, I have to use the 7,000 this year before the end of the June fiscal year deadline. So which way do you want me to roll that?
So when I read the feedback from the state, so from John Kaplan, it's a little bit further into our packet, or I'm sorry, when I see the email from Linda from her conversation with the state, it seems as if this is something that the state absolutely would want to be a part of.
Yes.
And so what I wonder is if with this feedback, could we roll the 7,000 into next year's budget? So that would be 17,000, which is enough to cover two. There would then be enough left over to help out with any match for a grant fund to cover the third. That is assuming that we would be able to then get that grant. But I mean, when I see the little smiley face about how much they'd want to be a part of it, it makes me think that we'd have a good chance.
Yes, I think that's correct. So yes, if we're permitted to roll the money over and we can go after I think that's a July deadline on the next grant opportunity. So yes, that would be an option. I think that's where I just need the clarification of, am I allowed to roll that money over? Because I've gotten more than one answer there.
I'm only an elected official. I mean, I don't know if staff want to tell me, no, you can't do that.
Sure. Well, Micah, what do you want to do? What's your preference?
If I was able to do the rollover, I would take it into the next fiscal year and see if we can, leverage that grant to get additional effect out of that money.
Okay.
Evan, do you have something?
Yeah, Mr. President, what we would need is a motion by the board to roll over any unspent funds from their budget of this year into next year for the purposes of rapid blinky flashy lights.
It's important we call them blinky flashy lights.
That's why we all know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So, trustees, are there any concerns with that plan?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Micah, when's the next grant deadline?
It's in July. And
this coming?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the next fiscal year.
And so you probably won't hear, it's in the next fiscal year. So if you roll this money over, you have money for the grant if you get it. If you don't get the grant, you make a choice of installing lights. And it sounds like, Micah, you'd have enough for two.
Yep.
Okay.
We can work with that.
Yeah, I guess my only thing was, just making sure that that intersection was addressed, if possible, before the school year started, at least. One way or the other, it sounds like that's probably possible. Or at least early fall.
I think so. I haven't talked to Public Works about their turnaround time, but we did reach out to the TAPCO vendor, and they're able to supply the parts within a few weeks.
And Micah, where the confusion is without the board's action, most of our budgets don't roll over.
Got it. Thank you for clarification there, Evan.
All right, Amber, I see your hand is up.
Micah, is there any concern that it looks like this quote expires or has an expiration date of July 1st, that maybe these prices are going to go up if we choose option 2?
They haven't changed much over the years. We've been renewing these. We've made a few passes at this, and it hasn't changed significantly. I haven't seen COVID drive a huge demand or component shortage or anything like that. That's what I was mainly worried about, was the turnaround time on getting the components, but TAPCO says that's not a problem.
Got it. Thanks.
And one last thing, Micah, are these, how are they powered?
I believe they have their own solar cell. Yeah, they're solar RFPs. That's right. Sorry, that's on the quote, isn't it?
Okay, because that's what the Energy Commission wants to see, make sure that we're kind of making sure we go solar and stay off the grid.
Yeah. For the bike walk committee purposes, I just reached out to Public Works and said, hey, what do you want me to quote on this to put in there? And
good. Solar's perfect.
They sent me this.
Great. Then we're all on the same page on that.
All right, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, Micah, so what I read in the information we got here on this, the locations would be Main Street at Pleasant, Main Street at Church is another place, and then the Prospect is the other. On Lincoln at Prospect, I think just looking at it, if you only get two, just my approach would be obviously by the school there on Lincoln Street on Prospect. I think that's very vital right there. But then as far as Main Street, Church, and Pleasant Street, there's not a vast difference between those two intersections. As long as there's something on that stretch right there where people can move to just a little further down the road and have a beacon that assists them in getting across that heavily traveled Route 15 there, obviously is important.
Yeah, we had made some similar modifications to what you're talking about after the fact. We've kind of dropped that church crossing from the list. We had kind of at the last minute thought we had an opportunity to get a third item onto the grant, and we moved with that. And then after further evaluation, thought that really was duplicate, like you're saying, and that Pleasant should be the priority with that left turn lane in there and kind of the contour of that hill. I think that should be the priority on Main, and Lincoln would be the next one. And we're starting to talk about kind of a crossing near the Park Street School as a potential third option, but that's still up in the air at this point.
That all sounds great.
All right. One other bike walk funding thing is we have been asked to supply a $400 donation towards the CHIPS bike swap. We've done that the last couple of years. I mean, the last year didn't happen because of COVID, but we would like to, I think, help them with that if we can. And if we're doing this rollover, I think we would have the room in the budget then to make that happen this year and still be able to cover 2 or more beacons next year, depending on what happens with the grant.
I would agree with that.
Sounds great. So they're doing the bike swap after all?
Yep.
That's great.
Great, Micah. Any other concerns with what you've heard, or do you feel good about us making that motion for rolling the money over?
That sounds great.
So do you want us to roll over minus the 400? Do you need it before July, or roll all of it?
Yeah, if we have to give a specific value, I'd say keep the 400 in this year, but if it's just has to be phrased as roll over remaining funds, then maybe it doesn't matter.
I think we can just do the rollover of the remaining funds. Before we get there, Annie, go right ahead.
I feel a little awkward, but I also feel like it's not right if I don't say this. I can't decide. The whole reason I moved forward the Bike Walk Advisory Committee was because of the petition, because of what happened at Pleasant and on Main and Pleasant at that crosswalk. And so is it just an impossible vision to somehow get that one? Like, am I being ridiculous and I just need to let it go and we get it before the fall? Inside of myself, I feel like, can we get somehow that one like now? But if that's just, ridiculous, that's fine. But I didn't feel right. It didn't sit well with me to not say that, at least.
I mean, from my perspective, what we're going to vote on is, or what I think we're going to vote on is about rolling over any unused funds. So if the cost of one can be done now, I mean, frankly, I'd leave it up to you guys.
Okay. Then I'm sorry. I should have just trusted Micah. Please forgive me, Micah. And thank you.
It's all right.
Yeah, I think the only thing would be it would have to be delivered by, received by, I think she said in the memo, June 20th.
Yep. Yeah, and we talked to TAPCO, and we could do that if we wanted to use the full remaining budget, or very close to it, to purchase one and get that in this year for the Pleasant crossing. I think it's just a question of, do we go after that one now, or do we wait and try and, get that state level funding to try and amplify that effect?
Yeah. I'd leave that up to you guys, frankly, to figure that part out.
Okay.
Evan, I see your hands up.
Thank you. You just said what I said. The committee is there to make recommendations and prioritize.
Yep. All right. So does somebody want to make a motion to roll over the bike walk advisory, remaining bike walk advisory committee's funding from FY21 into FY22?
I'm going to say so moved because you said it so well.
Thank you, Raj. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Amber. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right. Micah, Annie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you also. Thank you so much for caring so much about our community. Thank you.
And that will bring us into 5D, the discussion and potential action on refuse collection, public nuisance ordinance.
This one is Marguerite and Robin.
I was like, yeah, Robin's here.
You two can arm wrestle over it.
That's right. Trash.
Go ahead, Marguerite.
The trash. Go ahead, Robin.
I said it first. So we've had some concerns from residents that the trash pickup starts very early in the morning. I used to think this only happened in large cities, but apparently it's happening here as well. So we took a look at ordinances in other communities around and sort of came up with an example of something that blended what other people had done that might work for us if we want to move forward on this. We also have to take into consideration when CSWD facilities are open. You know, I give an example of the Essex facility. So it's open 5 days a week. And so, you know, as it says in the memo, generally it's the village clerk who puts the ordinance together, but certainly we've worked with the village clerk before, such as the one for buildings, nuisance buildings, and so on. So if the trustees want us to move forward with this, we could come up with a more formal ordinance and bring it back again. We just wanted to test the waters before we came up with a final product.
Thank you for that. Personally, yes, I'm totally in favor of this. I have a couple of curiosity questions about like that 6 a.m. end time, I suppose. I'd be curious how other communities have theirs. Is it 5 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m.? But then also I'd be curious about what types of then negative ramifications may there be on the haulers themselves, and or would this then, and I don't know if this is even possible, would Gothiers then say, nope, fine, we're done with the village then? We can't do it at that time. So it would just be a curiosity.
One thing, Andrew.
Yeah.
The state statute, there's a disorderly conduct under state statute, and I'm forgetting which statute on Title 13, it's, you know, exact statute, but it says noise in the nighttime after 10 p.m. at night and before 6 a.m. in the morning. So that's for state statute noise, somebody, you know, blaring a stereo, doing something outrageous, you know, disorderly conduct. But I'm not saying this trash haulers are disorderly, but it's, you know, obviously nighttime, and it's people with the majority of the public out there that are sleeping during those hours.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Raj?
I'm muted. Just curious if what went behind you asked about the time, I'm asking about the distance of 200 feet.
That was used in some other municipalities.
Are they
This other municipalities had used?
Are they similar in density and how we're laid out? I'm just.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, we looked at Winooski and Burlington and South Burlington. Out of the three we looked at.
Cool.
Marguerite, go ahead.
Yeah, so I do have just handy here just to answer one of your questions, Andrew, which is that Williston's, their ordinance is 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. South Burlington's is 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. and City of Winooski is 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. Those should all be AMs on the other side. I hope I said that right. And the other thing I will just note here as well is that Chief Hogue does have a nuisance ordinance that they have ready that's a draft that they were hoping at some point to put forward. And he said they'd be happy to write in a time, to copy it sort of as these other ones that we look at there. Some of them are noise control, but the two others are like a noise ordinance or a nuisance ordinance and regulations. And so he said they do have a draft of an ordinance that they'd be happy to put forward. Robin was talking about having to work to draft that or something, but I think it might be even easier than that. If you're looking at a nuisance ordinance already, they can look at just adding the time to that or adding the phrasing into that ordinance. That's a draft that they have ready to go.
I think that would be great. It'd be very interesting to have. One of my other curiosities, going off of a little bit what Raj had just said, the residents who most recently came to us to talk about this were talking about the post office square. And so does 200 feet reach that area? And I guess that would be a question if someone could come back at our next meeting, since I don't think any of us have a tape measure or the time to go do that.
We would have to look at that, but one of the things is their property line of the commercial property runs right up next to the residential. So that's one thing, as it does with many other commercial properties. And the other reason to have it in with the police department ordinance is then they can enforce it. And while Robin is very active, I'm pretty sure he's not here at 5:30 or 6 a.m. often.
No, that's you, Evan. You're here at 5 or 6 often, not me.
So it's best that the police be able to enforce. And when I say enforce, talk with the hauler on site about our ordinance. And then if we can get compliance that way, wonderful. That would be what we'd be looking for.
Great. Marguerite or Raj, are those hands new or holdovers?
New.
So board members, any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I just had a couple more, Andrew.
Yeah.
Is the distance necessary? And I ask that because I live a good distance away from the fairgrounds and the neighborhood next to it, but I can tell you every time they empty a dumpster, and I'm well over 1,000 feet away. So at 5 or 6 or 6:30 in the morning, when nothing much else is going on, a dumpster crash travels quite a long way. The other thing is our noise ordinance for excavation, demolition, alteration of repair of buildings, structures, or property is 9 to 7 a.m. So I would imagine that, or why wouldn't we want to line these up in terms of similar times to any kind of construction? Or we have a couple instances in our noise ordinance where we identify 7 a.m. as opposed to 6 a.m.
I will give you one example. Our commercial properties, there are some of them that, while we haven't talked to all of them, some will, it might interfere with their operations. Because everybody's a little bit different. I could tell you that in some areas, maybe even including in our industrial areas, they need to be in and out of there. But is it 6 a.m.? Is it 7 a.m.? There's too many variables. But the only thing I can tell you is if you pick 7 a.m. and if somebody comes at 6:30 from one of the haulers, we're going to get a complaint and we're supposed to then act upon it.
Well, that's why we're doing the ordinance though, because we're getting complaints. Yeah. And that's,
but if you pick
responding to the people that live here.
Correct. So the question is, what's reasonable? Is it 6 a.m.? Is it 7 a.m.? Is it something else? Other communities have picked similar times. It's just.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, yeah, no, I totally get it. I guess I'm just trying to find some alignment and some logic, because if you can't run a circular saw or, you know, start banging a hammer at until 7, but you can empty a bank of dumpsters at the same property at 6. You know, I'm just, what are the, you know, the police going to show up and the guy with the circular saw twiddling his thumbs is going to complain that he can't run his saw, but the guy, you know, I mean, it's just looking for alignment. And maybe that means moving the construction. I don't know. I'm just.
Okay. I understand.
Any other board member questions, thoughts on this one before I get to the hands in the public?
One other question. We do have a lot of ordinances that were created in my tenure on the board, and noxious weeds is one thing, and trash and such, people leaving that on their lawns. As far as just creating another ordinance, everything comes down to enforcement, and we can create all the ordinances we want, but if we're not enforcing them, not taking action, it really is, you know, misleading and just not really reassuring to the public.
Thank you for that, Dan. All right. So I see a hand up from Patrick Cagle. You go ahead and unmute yourself. Floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, folks, for addressing this, or at least putting the opportunity for us to take this to an address. I'm one of the residents who live right behind the post office plaza, and at 5 a.m., I would invite any one of you guys, any one of you folks, to come sit in my house and hear the noise that will quickly wake you up in the morning. It happens Monday, Wednesdays. Fridays, they've adjusted times, but certainly there's no reason why, in my view, a trash collection company could not pick up 6 a.m. or later in this area. They're obviously doing that in other areas in the village, in the town, in surrounding communities. And certainly with the ordinance for, like Raj said, for the construction, we've already kind of got something in place that this would certainly fall right in line with. In addition to the ordinance that's for noise existing, I almost am under the belief that there's fines that are associated with that for first, second, third offense and so on. And don't see why those can be implemented onto this new ordinance as well. I certainly don't enjoy the 5 a.m. crashing of a dumpster in the backyard. During the winter months, windows close. I sleep with a fan on. I've tried earplugs, and it's loud. And plain and simple, it's just uncalled for. These companies can operate, change their hours of operation to accommodate our needs. We are the village of Essex Junction currently, hopefully soon to become the city of Essex. But we need this. I mean, it's something that as a village resident currently, I would strongly support and do appreciate you folks taking the time to possibly address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I thought there was another hand up. I no longer see that hand from the public.
Hi, Andrew. It's Deb McAdoo. It was my hand.
Yeah, go ahead,
Patrick
Deb.
really covered everything I wanted to say. I just want to say that those trucks go from the post office and then they go to McDonald's and they go to Wendy's and they go to Kentucky Fried. I would love if you could do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Harlan, sorry if your hand was up earlier. Go ahead.
No, it wasn't. I was just coming in. I, interestingly enough, can sit on both sides of this issue. I'm with Raj. I'm not too far away. Those 5 a.m. Emptyings in the morning, I can hear from my house. But it's something that Evan alluded to, which is the other side that I also understand. So it's going to be a matter of trying to find the right time. What the dilemma is most of those dumpsters are located in parking lots. And then product deliveries that come in at a certain time. Those dumpsters are in delivery areas. You can only get so many trucks into an area at a certain time. I I think 5 a.m. is too early. I jump back and forth on the 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. But these are some of the considerations. The other thing that obviously I was going to say that part of the parking lot, not only delivery vehicles, but employees showing up and taking up parking spots and making it more difficult for a trash hauler to get to those dumpsters. So I think I do believe that an ordinance needs to be in there, but it's really trying to find that happy medium. Maybe it's 6 a.m., maybe it's 7 a.m. It depends on delivery times, employees showing up, businesses opening, so on and so forth. But I do definitely agree that something needs to be done. I think 5 a.m. is pretty early. And like I said, I'm way further than 200 feet away from those dumpsters, and I'm hearing them in the winter time. When it gets hot and the windows may be open, it's going to be even worse. So that was the only thing I wanted to add is the difficulties of finding the correct time to find that happy medium. Thanks.
Thank you, Harlan. Heidi Clark, you're next.
Hi, I don't need the video on, do I?
Only if you want.
No. Okay, cool. Let me stay anonymous. You also have to factor in, beyond the deliveries and such, if you push out the time, it pushes the residential deliveries later. And then you'll have people stuck behind trash trucks in the middle of the commute or trying to get their kids to school. One of the reasons for commercial operations going so early is so they get through their, whatever they have scheduled for that day in a certain amount of time. And I don't know that anybody's going to want trash trucks blocking residential streets for 5-10 minutes and backing up school and commuting traffic. So that's something to take into consideration if you're going to raise times. That's all.
Thank you, Heidi. Marcus Serta, floor is yours.
Thank you. So a couple of questions. I don't want to discount anyone's discomfort with the noise. I totally recognize that it's valid, but I also want to just ask the question, how many complaints are we facing? I live here in, near the railroad tracks, and I've learned to live with the train that comes through at midnight. So it's one of those things where, I've kind of gotten used to this being the sound of the village and have, like I said, learned to live with it. But has the village, and I understand that a consumer complaint or a consumer ask to some of these companies will probably fall on deaf ears. But I'm wondering if the village has reached out to these companies to ask whether or not they could work with us in order to adjust their routes. Because I also recognize too that if we stall them till later in the day, that means these trucks will be on our roads during busier times, which will slow down their ability to pick up trash, leaving their trucks on our roads longer. So we have to find a happy medium, but at the same time, I recognize, putting this ordinance in place and trying to maintain that ordinance, there's a lot of pieces here. And I'm just wondering if we're jumping a step versus trying to use the weight of the village to say, hey, we'd rather not pass this ordinance if we don't have to, if you're willing to work with us and make these changes, in coordination with us in some way. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. In terms of how often this happens or how many complaints, frankly, I don't know. I don't know how many the village has received over the years. I know that this isn't the first, second, or even the third time that we've had this kind of a conversation here in my tenure. And then in terms of conversations with village staff having conversations with the haulers, My understanding is that when this first came, or when this came to us at our last meeting a few months ago, that staff did reach out, and the hope was that some things would change from there. Not sure if the situation has changed broadly or not, but I'm assuming since we're talking about this topic again, that it hasn't permanently changed. And I also, I don't disagree with you. We got to find that happy medium.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I will throw in one last quick thing, and this is not for discussion now or in the near future, since obviously we have other things on our minds, but maybe in order to make this easier for us and also thinking about our roadways and how we want to be good stewards of our environment, maybe sometime in the future we talk about consolidated collection as a city or as a village.
Thank you for that. Patrick, is your hand still up or is it a new one?
It's a new one.
All right. I don't see any other hands up, so you can have the last word.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'd just like to compliment Marcus. I do agree on consolidated collection. That would be wonderful. To comment on a few of the other inputs here, the residential collection utilizes a different truck than the commercial collection. The commercial collection is an overhead truck that will shake the dumpster into the top of it. Having contacted Casella personally to ask them if they could adjust their times, their drivers are paid by the hour, and in addition get a bonus or an incentive to collect multiple stops as fast as they can. They have a program involved in there. So if it means that driver comes in at 5 a.m. because he can collect here faster at 5 a.m. versus at noon, that's what they do. Not that I blame the driver at all for any of that or Casella for that. They have a business, they have a job, they have to be as efficient as possible. But certainly we as the residents of this village also have the same things. We have jobs, we have times where we need to sleep, and at 5 a.m. in the morning is just certainly unacceptable. Happy medium between the times that have been thrown out, 6:30. That would be a wonderful time. I would have no objection at all. 6:30 a.m. It seems to me to be a fair handshake on both sides. And having reached out to Casella and Gothiers myself, it lasted for a day or two, and then or a couple collections times, and then went right back to what we're at today. So once again, thank you folks for everything. Wonderful job on everything you guys do, and thanks for hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you. So on this item, I see that we have, do you want a formal motion or do you have the feedback you need to move forward? Staff?
I think, we can go back again and talk to the haulers, see if there's a happy medium. Really, this was just, as I said, to test the waters to see if the trustees wanted to go forward with it. And if they did, would there be some changes? Obviously, we'll talk to the chief as well. But I can talk to the haulers again tomorrow and see if there's any flexibility from their point of view.
That'd be great if you could talk with them. Again, I want to make sure that we hear from that side as well. Evan, did you have your hand up?
I did. Do you guys, 6 a.m., 6:30, do you want to leave that to the last when we bring it back, or do you want to give us guidance?
And so our construction ordinance is 7 o'clock. Is that right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Yes, it is 7. Someone did make a good point earlier, though. Do we want them to be on the roads at rush hour?
I will agree that we do not want them. I would say anybody who's tried to drive through the community at 7:30 when school, it's not good.
I
would
would
be-
say though that
ahead,
every
Raj.
single day of the week, there's a trash truck coming through my neighborhood and past a couple bus stops on Pearl Street at that exact same time, picking up residential, making far more stops on the road than these commercial haulers are picking up. I mean, I'm just pointing that out. You know, my neighborhood happens to get hit by literally every day of the week by a different company, sometimes two companies, roughly between 6:30 and 8 in the morning. And oftentimes right around the same time, kids are walking down the street to go to the bus. So I'm not sure it's, you know, the community's sort of overrun with trash trucks because there's different companies. You know,
that is true.
I don't really see it as the big, I just don't see it as the big traffic clog that, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but you know, having had to drive to ADL and the high school for all these years, I just don't see it. But
So I'd be curious on the hauler's perspective of 6:30. What does that mean for their operations and their capability to serve customers in our community?
Okay.
So do you need a motion from us on that, or are you guys good?
No, I think we're good now.
All right. We are now on to 5E. Consider approval of the use of economic development funds for the One Main Street Park.
This one's Robin.
Okay. I was trying to send myself a message to remind me to call the haulers tomorrow. Anyway, so this has been a long time in the making, not as long as the connector road, but we had a charrette, wasn't terribly well attended, but it was warned. We had the charrette during the open and outside event, thinking there'd be more people in the village center. Can't remember everybody who was there, but there were people from the Capital Committee, Planning Commission, Trustee. Wiso Makuku was there from the town Community Development Department. Evan might even have been there. I know his wife was there. No, I do remember the Evan, I'm joking. So they come up with a design, then it went to the trustees. We got more feedback about adding more trees, etc., which we did do. And as we said, the first memo, which was a while ago, the design controlled the CAP, the Corrective Action Plan, which was done by an environmental engineer through a grant that we got through the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Now, the grant is for remediation of certain soils. It's not to design the park. It's not to build the park. So we've been working with the environmental engineer, and we now have to put together a bid document that people can bid on. It'll be in two pieces. One piece will be remediation of the site. The second portion will be to implement the design. We should also remember that, for want of a better phrase, this isn't a jigsaw puzzle. This is part of a larger jigsaw puzzle that we're building, you know, one piece at a time, so to speak. And so I approached the village engineer, Rick Hamlin, and asked him, would he put together the bid documents? And he's willing to do that basically for cost, or probably a little below cost from his perspective. And so he will be working with the environmental engineer to make sure that everything that's in the bid documents satisfies the purpose of the grant and is in line with the Corrective Action Plan, the CAP. And that's where we are at the moment. So this is really about getting the funds released to put together the big bid documents for the park. I will say that we've agreed with the owner of the property that we can store the soil temporarily in the parking lot behind the Firebird Cafe. It has to be stored for a while the soil's tested. Because the nature of the contamination, most of the contamination is way below where we're going to be working. Probably most of the soil taken out is going to be put back in again. The blacktop will be taken up and recycled. The concrete will be removed. But a lot of the actual soil will probably be put back into the hole created by the remediation. Any questions?
I have a few. So I've been pretty clear throughout this process that if we're going to do this, I'm under the impression we're going to do it once and we're not going to get another opportunity to design this park. And so as such, as we're talking about that, I mean, I don't see the design here within the memo, and so I can't really even show the public who are here now what their thoughts are, unless I'm missing it within the packet.
The design was in the last memo you got when we discussed putting in a few more trees. I know that, I gotta say this, Rick Hamlet suggested, you may remember this part, I suggested an elm because all the streets in the village used to be filled with elms for Dutch elm disease, and then people thought that was too tall. So I have asked the tree advisory committee that we're set up to advise on trees in the village to suggest some trees for the park.
That's great. But so I have some other concerns that I would love to hear some formal input from the tree advisory committee, for instance, on yes, trees. But also I don't see why, I know the charrette was not well attended, why we can't put this out on Facebook, why we can't put this out on Front Porch Forum, why we can't have the design on the website and say, hey, what do you like about this? What do you not like about it? The fact that, if I remember correctly, there's a fountain within this, which there's also a fountain about a stone's throw away over at Veterans Memorial Park. So do we really need two fountains? So none of this is to belittle the design or to say that the work going into the design is not something that I appreciate, because I do. I just don't feel that this is the final design yet. So I'm not comfortable asking for bids on something that, frankly, I don't think is the right park or the right design for the park. But I would look to other trustees for other thoughts, comments on this. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I want to point out that the Design Five Corners plan, which was a very well-attended charrette, has been incorporated into our municipal plan. And although it doesn't give a specific design for that park, it does say that community input was they wanted to see trees and green space in that spot. I think that the idea of putting it out, and I've seen the Facebook comments, but the only problem is that you can't just say, what does everyone want? Some of the Facebook comments I saw were people saying, well, why don't we just have lawn there? Why don't we, someone said, why don't we have sunflowers there? And I don't think people grasp that we can't tear up the pavement there. It would cost millions of dollars. We're limited to what we can do there. You know, the charrette wasn't well attended. On the other hand, everybody there, the idea of a charrette isn't to take everybody's design ideas and somehow make a hybrid model out of them. It's to get the concept. What generally do people want to see? And I think I'm safe in saying that at the charrette, everyone said they wanted to see trees and green space there, and maybe some other, you know, shrubs or something in between. And really, a lot of the variation and the nuance was about where do the benches go. I mean, the space you're talking about is about the size of an average backyard. So the design possibilities are not infinite. I think the community has given input about the kind of thing they want to see there. And lastly, and I'm sorry, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, and I'm not going to try to do that, but you know, members of our staff tend to have expertise. Rick Hamlin is a civil engineer. Wendy has a master's degree in library science. Robin is a Vermont registered landscape architect, and I know because the village pays for his certification, to renew his certification, if I'm not mistaken, and he also has a graduate degree in landscape design. And I'm not trying to, you know, puff up Robin. He does a good job of doing that himself. I'm just kidding, Robin. But I think he has some design skill here that we're kind of dismissing. You know, I'm all in favor of public input, and I would be great if we could pull out some component of this. But I went back over the minutes of this last year, and last year at this time, or I think it was maybe a month later, I said, whatever the process is, fine, but could we just get this done and not have it become a protracted process? And here we are a year later, and we're ready to go. So I would like to see it go forward. I think it would be terrific if we could, when the community comes out of COVID, hopefully this summer, it would be great if by the end of the summer or fall, I mean, maybe really wishful thinking, if we could actually have this in place. So I would be happy to have Robin pull some component out that can be, some aspect of it that we could get public comment on if we could think of that. But boy, it'd be great if we could just move this forward. And I'm sorry, I hate to be negative, but not find another way to delay it another 6 months or a year. That's my vote. Thanks.
Can I speak, George?
Yeah,
go ahead, Dan.
I'm done.
I hear what George is saying. I don't disagree with what he's saying. As far as, I'd like to just see some kind of a layout of exactly what it's going to look like. Have something to show the people of the village. I mean, as far as getting public weigh in on something, like I've said before on many issues, at what number do we have that we have to reach before we move forward? And with any issue that we face as a board, does it have to be 2% of the population, or where do you draw the line when you move forward with stuff? And you're going to get so many different opinions. I think just having something to look at would be great, and either say yes or no. I think it, should move forward as soon as possible.
Sorry, my window froze on me for a moment. Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, this is like the park that's never going to get built.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated by the time it's taking to do this, but I do have to say, I mean, that charrette was not, when it happened in the place we were all in, it really wasn't much of a public engagement, honestly. It was a terrible time to do it. I wasn't going anywhere near an inside building with a bunch of people at that point in time myself. And I don't know what, we've got a few people with raised hands in the audience tonight, and I don't, they've been waiting, I'm suspect to comment on this. And I'm not dissing the design at all. But I'm just feeling like people are not feeling heard, and I don't know where the fine line is on that, Dan. I honestly don't know, but I just know that people are a little frustrated by the process, and I agree, it's a tiny little parcel that's part of a much bigger idea. It's very limited in what we can do, and I think part of the reason we keep getting all these ideas is people haven't heard why it's limited, and I don't know what the answer is to this process. I understand the limitations. I understand the design and why it is the way it is. And I don't have strong feelings about holding, but I think that people are excited about having it, and I think they want it. They want a little more input, and I don't know, to answer your question, Dan, I don't know where that number is, but I kind of feel like that's where we're at.
I hear what you're saying, Raj. Maybe an option would be to come up with 4 designs, and then, I don't know, how do you get people to weigh in on our website and say, pick A, B, or C, or D, whatever, and you got a deadline here. You pick the option. You don't, I mean, if we put it out for everyone to weigh in exactly what they want, we're going to get, I'm not saying exact numbers, but 50 or 100 different opinions on what they want. And they're not going to be happy if they don't get what they want. I'm saying come up with some generic or basic ideas, 4 of them, and here, you got until the X date. You can look online, see it. You don't have to meet in person. People are still worried about the COVID, and you click. You pick A, B, or C, or D, and then once that time frame is up, the majority that that's what we go with. Move it forward.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I think if there was a preamble or an introduction to the project about why these decisions were made, and it doesn't have to be 3 pages. I mean, like I said, I just don't think people understand the issues with well, putting grass there and the soil contamination and you know, a lot of other issues where I think if they did understand it, or if they were able to go someplace and read it, they would be like, okay, I get it. But I think, you know, I don't want to draw this out for a whole nother year. And maybe we should hear what the folks would, you know, who are with their hands raised, have to, you know, what they have to say about it. But
any other board member comments on this? So I guess I'm just going to go, and then George will get to you. I guess my frustration has been with this. For all the times where I'll say that we don't want to become the city of Burlington, one thing I think they did really, really well was when they redesigned City Hall Park. It was not done in a room. It was with staff figuring it out. There was a significant effort on public engagement to redesign their park. This is not City Hall Park in Burlington. This is not the same size. But frankly, we're creating something that doesn't exist. And so I don't understand why we haven't been able to do something even remotely halfway to what they have done to engage the community in creating their community park. Again, this is not to belittle anyone's credentials. I would say the same thing if it were Rick Hamlin coming to us. If this is one of those times where we don't have the opportunity to do this again, and so I would just want to make sure we do it right the first time. George, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. How would everyone feel? Imagine if this was a privately owned piece of property and the owner, one day, suddenly we saw some trucks arrive and 10 trees came up and they put in 10 new trees. I don't know whatever works in there, and some benches and a small fountain or something like that. Everyone would be thrilled, okay? We would be thrilled. We would all be thrilled to see that ugly, nasty stretch of asphalt finally go away and to have some green space buffering at 5 corners. And I don't think anyone, if it was just done, some private person owned it and just did it, I don't think anyone would be arguing or being upset, well, they didn't put the tree in the right place here. I'm not saying, I hear you, Andrea, I get it. We have an opportunity for community input. I'm fine with that. But please, for goodness sake, please get this done. Can we just figure out a process that gets it done and moves it forward and just push it ahead? Let's not try to find a way to delay this another 6 months. Thank you.
All right, so Tim, I think your hand was up first. Why don't you go ahead and get it started?
Yeah, okay, I was hanging on for this one. So first I want to, I'm going to talk from the Tree Advisory Committee. I'm sort of representing them, that we emailed each other and said I could do that. So just to, you know, I think it was good because I think I was at the meeting when it was the last time discussed, when it was trying to go for that, the money, there was a due date. And so at that point, you know, we had given some input, and it was like I think our understanding was like it was a preliminary design, you know, and then we sort of advocated for just adding trees because that would sort of maximize the soil removal, because that was one of the key components that was necessary as an input for that, you know, grant, I guess. And so I guess that's one of our, you know, key things about the design was then I don't think we really saw like, well, so what is the final, you know, thing there? One of the things we're concerned about is, before we can kind of talk about the trees, is the and I think Warren's going to talk about this in a second, just, you know, what's actually needed for the size of the hole and how much soil really needs to be, you know, what that needs to be like in the design that we saw. It's not sufficient for trees. They're not going to survive. So it's from our perspective. So we need to understand that better. We think the you know, also from the tree committee, you know, and I think we heard it through some of the commentary already, you know, yes, I think it was a theme in the charrette. I think it was a theme in the Facebook comments. There's about 60 of them. We've gone through all those, about people talking about wanting more green space and trees and shade. So there's clearly a lot of support for that. I guess as opposed to pushing to get it done, I think it's always a good idea to who has compiled the themes from the public comments, whatever they came from, whether they came from Rashret, whether they came from Facebook. It seems like one of the great things to do is compile the themes. What have in that. That's how people can see that they're being heard. Is that the trustees and the people who are going to do that have compiled the themes and said, here's what we were told, here's the themes, here's the general things, here's how the design meets those themes. Or if it can't, here's why. Or it can only a little bit, here's why. I understood better that a lot of people didn't want as much hardscape, but I understood some of that from that last meeting, but I don't think that got out very widely yet. That like there's I think some reasons to not have a lot of soft, more hardscape because of the traffic in a really tight area. Anyway, I think that's something that hasn't really been put together. So that, and then also it could decide, well, do we have enough input? And no, we would like to do one more thing of input. We give it a month. It can have a timeline that can still meet the thing. So I think that's a good thing to do. Now, just to give a personal comment, it was touched on here, this is like City Hall Park in Burlington. This is the thing in the center, the very center of our village, maybe our new city, right? And even though it's small, it's right there in the center. So to me, it's worth it. Spend the money, get more expert input, make multiple designs. So that way we're really sure the thing that's in the center is right. Because let's do it once and make it good and really get it right, and not do it fast. Let's do it right. That would be my vote for that, because of it being so much in the center, and so visible. If it was out in a corner, a far-flung corner, it wouldn't matter so much. It's okay, go for it. But with this guy being right in the center, let's make sure all that input's there and make sure we really do it right, and even spend a little more money if we have to. That'd be my input. Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Warren Spinner, you're next.
Hi, folks. Thank you for the opportunity to address you with this One Main Street Pocket Park. I've been looking at it for a long time, looking at the history of the site. We all know it's been a service station, gas station for years. The entire piece of property that we're talking about is covered with asphalt, which we all know. My concerns as your tree warden, and I'm on the tree committee, and I am the past city arborist for the city of Burlington. For those of you who aren't aware of that, and that I was also first involved with the redesign of City Hall Park. So I've had some experience with this park building and what the trees need and et cetera. So my concern with this site is basically what the two-page letter in front of you addresses, and the main concern is the soils. And with that, I'm afraid of what you're going to find under there. I don't know if you've done soil boring or testing to know exactly what you're going to end up with. But that's number one concern. Number two is that is extremely compacted soil. It's been compacted to hold the asphalt. And when you get into soils like that, they're typically not ideal for supporting plant life. They're compacted. there's limited air and there's limited nutrients. So what you need to do, obviously, is move that out before you put your vegetation in, trees, shrubs, whatever. I'm guessing it's a conceptual design. It's not a final design that I've looked at. Shows, I'm not sure if it is 4 or 5 trees or 7 trees. And it says Princeton American elms, which very nice tree, would look nice on the site. But the soil requirements to support that tree, to get it to grow to its mature height, is going to require in the vicinity of a 20-foot by 20-foot by 3-foot deep soil area. That's 1 tree optimum growth. For those of you that don't know what those elms look like, they're in front of Lincoln Hall. Very nice structured tree, but they do require a lot of soil to get them to grow to that point. If you're only going to excavate a very small pit, you're basically going to end up with a very small tree that will not grow well. Let's take, for example, if it did grow well and you went with that design with all that bluestone, because tree roots need air and water to survive, they're not going to go down in, they're going to stay on the surface. So should they survive and with just small tree pits and grow out into that area, you're going to see some damage down the road caused by the tree roots. So my point here, without going into a whole lot of detail, and it's strictly about the planting sites, the trees need to have adequate soil. The thing that concerns me is that if you were going to take out that amount of soil out of that property, considering that it could be contaminated, it could be very expensive. So my other thought is, if you looked at other options in the design process for doing planters, for example, different size plants, maybe more shrubs, smaller trees. It's probably worth thinking about this and designing it correctly. I understand and I can see some trustees are really, let's get this thing done. But the point is, and it's been said, Tim said it, I think all the trustees know this is right in the heart of the downtown at the 5 corners. It's worth doing it right because you want to build a legacy here that'll last. And the other unfortunate thing, it's a really small area, but it's really an important area. So that was my comment for this, and I thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you, Warren. Annie Cooper, you're next.
Hi, thank you. I'm normally all for let's get stuff done. Sorry, I'm trying to put my hand down at the same time. I'm normally all for let's go. But I don't feel like I want to say that just yet in this regard. I respect George and I respect all of you. I respect our staff. I respect the degrees, the intelligence, and the work put in. I agree 1,000,000% with what Tim said, that all of the feedback from community, from all arenas, including Facebook, including the meeting, all of that needs to be compiled and before your eyes as a board for you to see if there's an alignment, like Sim McCormick said about this other process we're doing. There has to be an alignment between what the community is talking about and what you have. And if, like Tim said, you don't see that, then there must be an explanation to why. And all of that works, I'm sure, for all of our community to have that understanding that that's how you all made this decision. I I also agree that we don't want to wait forever because it's got to get done. But I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and the church that I grew up in was Holy Name of Jesus Catholic Church, and that church was stunning. And then there was a renovation, like many churches in the 80s, and everybody got excited, donated money, but there was no input. And what that now is hard for me as a person to walk into, and I don't think any of us want to have that feeling at what is the center of our soon-to-be independent city of. I think the value and where we're at as a community and in this piece is too high value. I'm going to say again, too high to move right this second on this without the elements that both Tim is speaking to and Warren. It's brilliant to consider planters. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So I don't know what the path is to make sure it's not going to take forever, but also to find out that we have some alignment, or if not alignment, why that can't be true, or you know, like Dan said, we don't want to ask forever and never get out of the weeds either. But I think all of these things can be done. A silly thought I'm having is, what if the tree committee and Robin, like, what if you made a little quick committee, not a hard one, not a complicated one, of who makes those decisions to present to you? I don't know. Thanks for letting me talk so much.
Thank you, Annie. Harlan, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. And I think all of the comments that have been made tonight about this park are all valid. So I'm looking for that middle road. I'm looking for that happy medium, and I agree that especially with George, that right now it's a chunk of pavement and it's not the prettiest thing I've ever seen, and it's sitting in the center of our village. So maybe there's something temporarily that we can do to improve that, whether we change the color of the concrete at the moment, and we add some benches and maybe a picnic table with an umbrella, or I don't know, something. There's some sort of compromise there to make it look better than what it does right now while we get to a final design. A lot of credentials were thrown out, the engineers and the architects, and they've all done a great job, and they do a great job. So on a personal note, who's going to take care of this park, and have we talked to anybody about the maintenance concerns? One of the things that I'm very fortunate is that my boss and I always have discussions about projects that are going to be done, and he keeps forgetting about where I'm going to put the snow, or how much we're going to put into my budget to make sure that the trees are pruned and cared for. So if there is going to be a committee similar to what Annie just mentioned, I would determine who's going to take care of that park and probably bring them in and see what maybe some of their concerns are as to where are we going to put the snow, and who's going to pressure wash this, and who's going to take care of the trees, and find that happy middle road. Let's dress it up and make it look pretty for right now, and let's get a really good park design moving forward. I'm not sure how that all looks like, but again, on a personal note, who's going to take care of it, and what concerns do they have with it? So that was what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Harlan. I see no other hands up from the public, so I will bring this back to the board. Thoughts, trustees? Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I do have to, and Warren, I can invite you to respond, but I have to believe that whatever organics are in the soil in front of Firebird haven't stayed restricted just to the front of the Firebird. I would assume that they've, over the years, over the decades, have moved and migrated behind Firebird and over to the side of Firebird. And if you look behind Firebird and to the side, you see very good growth. You see the trees on the backside of Firebird are growing quite well. On the side of Firebird, I see a lot of growth. In fact, we probably had to cut some of that back. And so I'm not really sure. I mean, are you saying that just because there's pavement there, the trees aren't going to grow well? That something about the compaction of the pavement has caused a problem, or exactly? You know, it seems to me that this is something that could also be mitigated by, if I'm assuming that when we break through the pavement to remove the soil, there will be new soil put in place. I'm assuming that's the case. I don't think they're just going to stick a tree down there. I mean, I would have assumed that we would have anticipated these problems with whatever we went ahead with, whatever trees went in there. Maybe you could explain. I see a lot of good trees grow, very good tree growth all around the center of the village in all kinds of little troubled and burdened places. In fact, it's interesting to me that the one place I don't see good tree growth is where we went through elaborate steps on the 4 Pearl Street building, where we went through these elaborate steps to put in the owner put in this big network to accommodate the tree growth there. And I look all around the village, the village center, and all the streets leading into the village, and those are the only trees that aren't doing well. So maybe you could just explain it to me, Warren. Thanks.
Sure. The concern I have is out front. It's where it's exactly what the Robin's note was about the soils and what the issues could be there. So the point is, number one, there's no question it's compacted underneath the asphalt because it has to be to support the asphalt. Second of all, I don't know if the oil tanks or gas tanks were pulled out of there. There's always a concern that there is contaminated soil. And that's why the soil remediation issue was in this report from Robin, that this environmental group is going to be monitoring the soils. So it would be helpful to know if they've done soil borings in there, so you know what's in there. So I don't know if that's been done or not.
Yes,
but the compaction of the soil under there, what's in there is who knows if it's good for tree growth or not. My guess that it's going to need to be modified. And if it is, that means every bit of that soil that comes out has to be tested, has to be separated. And if you get into a situation where it's contaminated soil, that is going to be very expensive. So it's kind of, you don't know, but you should anticipate that it could be very costly to take that soil out. Ran into that several different projects that I was involved with in Burlington, and it's costly. So you know the site has what was there. You can almost anticipate that there's going to be some issues. You will hope not. So one option might be to try to get the vegetation out closer to the curb line. Maybe it's less contaminated there, I don't know. But you're still going to have to provide good soil for the trees somehow. Whether it's you do like a planter half out of the ground, half in the ground, I don't know. This is where the next step of this is doing the actual design. Having someone do that, some professional, would be your next steps. But the red flag for me is what's under that asphalt for sure. For Pearl Street, if you'd like me to comment on that, that was a bit more challenging. Well, both sites are challenging. There wasn't going to be hardly any soil over at 4 Pearl for trees. So we discussed with the owner to put the silva cells in, and these are cells that hold soil. One of the issues may be what's happening with those trees is I wasn't there to see it go in. I don't know what everything was suggested that the contractor used to put in there, but not knowing how it went in, how those cells, if they got the full amount of them in there to support the trees. I'm assuming the soil that they used was good. There's too many unanswered questions because no one from the village side was watching that happen. So that's, I don't know what else to tell you about that, except something didn't go right there. That's my thought.
So trustees, any other thoughts on what we've heard so far?
I agree with what I've heard about maybe putting raised beds and maybe not going with such a large tree that requires a larger root base and more, more excavation. I think maybe our tree advisory board would come up with some other variety or species of tree that would be visibly appealing to the people, and maybe something that would keep its greenery throughout the year as opposed to a deciduous tree that's losing its leaves and making a mess on the sidewalk and street.
Okay. I would be curious on what a design would be from the tree committee in collaboration with Robin, put the brain trusts together and see what can come out. At the same time, the feedback that has been received from the community so far, and if there are ways to continue that process to make it as iterative as possible, to again make sure that the community feels like it's a community park and not just a park that happened to pop up one day. That just remains my concern. So I've said that I'm not okay moving forward with bid documents. I'd like to wait until this is something that actually feels like something that would be a community's park. In terms of how much community input, or honestly how I would know when I'm there, I can't define that. So I'm not sure how long that would take. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just disagree with you, Andrew. The community 4 years ago very kindly and generously agreed to a 1% tax, a penny on the tax rate, rather, to create this economic development fund. And we have been sitting on this money and sitting on this money. And so far we used some of the money to purchase that property. But so far we have given them nothing back for it. And I think it would be very valuable and very important for us to move forward and try to do something as soon as possible to just show the community our gratitude and give them back. I appreciate the tree advisory committee advising us on the tree growth there, but I would actually say I'd rather have the planning commission. If someone's going to design it, I think it'd be more, because it's mostly hardscape, I think the planning commission should design it. I'm not trying to offend the people on the tree advisory committee, but I have to say it seems a little bit like overreach here to me. It's a little bit of movement into territory that I don't think is really in their mission statement. I'm sorry, guys. I don't mean to offend you. I appreciate everything you're doing, and I agree there should have been a community project, but I would like to see it. Obviously I'm going to lose, but I'm just going to try to go down fighting and say, please, please get this done. Let's not try to find a way to delay it for another year. Can we please get this done and give the community something back for the money they've given us? Thank you.
So we can go about this one of two ways. We can either have a vote on the motion or the recommendation that we have, or we can make some other ask. I think what may make sense from what I think I'm hearing so far, Robin, I'd wonder if you could bring this to a tree committee meeting, if you could bring it to a planning commission meeting, and hear what they have to say. See if that changes, or see what design ideas may come out of that. If there are other committees that may make sense, and or going to Harlan's point about those who may maintain it. whether that's public works or whether that's recreation staff who's going to be maintaining this. Hearing what they may have for thoughts and how that may change this. I'm just frankly, it's 9:55 at night, and I'm usually in bed by over an hour from now. Or I've been in bed for over an hour by now, so I'm looking for thoughts here.
Are you looking for me to speak, Andrew?
If you'd like to, sure.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know where Warren got the elm trees. I think I started off by saying that was something that was knocked back about a year ago. I just assumed Harlem would look after the park. But sure, I don't see why we can't talk to the Tree Advisory Committee, talk to the Planning Commission. The one thing we have to keep in mind is that this is, and Warren was right, it's schematic in many ways, but this is part of the corrective action plan that was put together by the guy. There was always the thought that we're capping rather than removing most of the soil, that planters would be set on top of the pavers so that it would be seasonal in nature, and the park could be bigger if we needed to be bigger. The other thing was, as I said when I started, that this isn't being designed in a vacuum. It's going to be part of a very large lawn area that's going to be contiguous with it eventually, if everything goes according to plan, if the design 5 corners. But it never hurts to take a look at it again, that's for sure. But I will contact the environmental consultant tomorrow and see if I can have them put on a hold and finishing off the environmental thing. As Warren said, yeah, we're going to have 2 stockpiles behind the Firebird Cafe, one clean, one dirty. They'll be tested, probably take a month, maybe 6 weeks. Some will be put back in. Obviously, all the soil microbes were crushed. So there will be some remediation to soil. There'll be organic matter put in. So yeah, there's a lot to do. That would all have been part of the bid package, not part of this, which is, as Warren said, it's more schematic than anything else. Might as well throw it in there. I have a favorite. You'll see it outside Rick Hamlin's office. It's pretty standard in urban spaces. It's, in fact, I said it, I think, in an email to Nick Meyer maybe yesterday. Honey locusts, they're a floodplain species. They do well in drought. They do well in flood. They get dappled sunlight, so you can actually sit underneath them and read a book. And they get a beautiful color in the autumn. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. And probably most of them are correct. You just have to make your mind up and move forward.
All right, so it sounds like, Robin, you're going to chat with some other people and come back to us at some point in time in the future.
Sure.
Great. Trustees, anything else, or are we ready to go on to our next agenda item? Warren, is that your hand that's still up? Is that a holdover, or did you have another thought?
Yeah, I think it's a holdover. My hand is no longer up.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so we amended the agenda to go to the CVE item, Champlain Valley Expos on amplified sound waiver. Amber, I think you had requested to have this one pulled out.
I did. I asked to have this pulled out because I was looking to get some clarification about what CVE was requesting from us. It was my understanding that a sound waiver was not required.
Yeah. Why did you think, I guess, yeah, and I'm happy, Evan or Robin, I'd be the, you can speak to this too. I think it was a little bit mixed because at first it came in that there was a request because of the graduations that then, due to this weekend of having these graduations and having a video wall, that it would be louder than what they're allowed to have. And then there was a few more communications that came after that sort of noted that they were going to come in under what their original request of 30 waivers was anyway, but that they originally did not, they didn't want them to be included in those 30 waivers. They did want it to be its own separate thing, just because they aren't, they're not gaining anything. This is more about the community and not about like CVE as their business and their 30 waivers of having those things. So I do get why that was a little bit just confusing maybe in that sense, but Robin or Evan, you can weigh in, if you have a different understanding, but I think originally they were asking to sort of have that weekend be a separate sort of pass of that, just because they don't oversee any of those events. The schools hire it out to different contractors who then, put up the wall and sort of do all of that part of it.
That is my understanding.
Yeah, I think Tim Shea went out of his way when he was talking to me to let me know that these events are not something that CVE are coming forward and saying, this is an event for us. This is CVE being the mediator, for want of a better phrase, where they've been approached by the high schools. And they're saying, look, the high schools want to do this. We're not charging anybody any money for anything. We're just accommodating them as good community members. So we don't want this to be seen as something that CVE's putting together. This is something that the high schools are putting together, and we're just providing them the canvas to, to develop whatever painting they want. I think he was very, very keen for the village, the trustees, everyone to know that it's not his gig, it's the high school's gig, so to speak. He doesn't want to be punished for doing a good thing, and he thinks the high school graduation can be sort of noisy. They're not the hours you would have a concert. They're mid-afternoon, early evening. I think the latest one's over at 7 o'clock or something, I'm remembering. So it wouldn't be the normal concert event. It's a celebration of community, really.
Just to be clear, they're not anticipating using the full 30 that we've already granted them anyways.
Right, that's correct.
That is the conversation I had with Tim Shea.
Okay.
And just to maybe one quick thing, part of their issue is because of COVID and wanting to do safe distancing, they want a video wall. And the only way to do the video wall during the day is it has to face a certain way so that the sun isn't hitting it. And then to do that, the sound gets a little bit louder, but they're trying to control that too. So he's really trying to, work with everybody here, and it is during the day. And so that's what's going on. But in talking to him, he is not going to have as many concerts. The concert promoter is not doing nearly as many or the size that they originally contemplated.
No, and sorry, it will be facing east, so in Amber's direction. So it's not where they normally push the noise, but Amber should still be at work at the time the concerts are happening, so it shouldn't be a problem.
I think Tim just joined us as well.
It's all of Amber's neighbors that we are also concerned about.
Yeah, I'm on Evan, Tim Fay. I just joined on here, so happy to answer any questions already.
Tim, did I get that correct? Did you hear my?
Yeah, it's because of the high schools really want to do a video wall. I may be repeating what Evan said. And in order to do a video wall, the video wall needs to face east towards Five Corners. Typically, when we do summer concerts in the Midway, the music faces west because we have such a long runway until we are near residential areas. But the high schools feel strongly in order for the parents and family members to experience it, they need a video wall. Is the only reason why we're projecting the sound to the east. And because of that, we know we cannot stay within the set parameters of the sound ordinance. I also, important to know, we're not charging the high schools for the space at all, so there is absolutely no financial gain of CVE doing this. We're only doing this for the high schools. They're covering there are costs for sound and stage, video wall that the 4 schools are dividing it to making it economically feasible for them, but we're not charging them any type of facility fee. So I don't want folks to think that here's CVE again asking for something. This is entirely for the benefit of the high schools.
Tim, I think you might have missed my earlier comments, but the only reason I asked to have this pulled was because of confusion that I had regarding some emails that had gone around. And so I just wanted some clarification, which Marguerite had given a little earlier, saying that you weren't anticipating using the 30 waivers that we had already given to you anyways, because of things changing at the fairgrounds. And so I guess what my concern was, maybe not a concern, but was if you already had the 30 waivers and this would fall under those, they would be all subject to the same. Why do we need to grant an additional 4?
Yeah, good question. I'm glad you asked that question. Put those 30 aside for a second, if you would. What's unique about this is because we're projecting the sound to the east, we're going to break we're not going to be able to stay within the parameters of the sound ordinance. The sound's going to be louder on the east perimeter than it typically would be because we're projecting the sound to the east. We always project to the west because the residential area is so close to our eastern border as opposed to the western border. So it's only because we're projecting to the east. So this is very unique, and it's not tied to those additional 30 sound waivers. So we're not asking for an additional 4. We're asking for our sound waiver agreement to not exist for these concerts. For these high school graduations.
I'm tracking with you now.
Just because, Tim, it's Raj, just because we should ask, what time is the latest one of these over?
Yeah, so Thursday night, the 10th, is Essex Tech. They start at 6:30. I think they're saying about a 90-minute runtime.
Okay, no big deal.
Friday is CBU. That's 3:30 or 4, the 2-hour runtime. Saturday is South Burlington and Essex. I think the second one is Essex. It'd be done by, I think, 8 at the very, very latest.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, or are we ready for a motion?
And they're all required to eat at local restaurants before and after, correct, Tim?
They are. And I say, and feel free to reach out to Essex leadership in the school. They came to us saying, we know we can't do something inside. Is there anything we can do here? Last year we did the drive-ins. The economic model of the drive-ins just don't work. So this is the closest thing we could do to give the high schools something.
Thanks,
I'm ready to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I think this is great. I move the trustees grant the additional sound waivers for the weekend of June 11th and 12th for CVE for graduation ceremonies only.
I'll second.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, George. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you, Tim. Thank you as always, and really grateful that you were able to do this as as close to normalcy as we can allow for these kids to have for their high school graduation. We should do. So I appreciate it.
No, I know the schools and the parents are very appreciative of your support as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, Tim.
Good night.
And the last one was the minutes from our previous meetings.
So I will make a motion to approve the April 7th meeting minutes with the amendment to change Article 2 was about the land acquisition fund, not merger. So just it should reflect that, the accurate article.
Do you have the line item for that, or line number?
It's gonna be in 65. starting at 65.
Okay. Kathy, do you have what you need for that one?
I do, thank you.
Great. So you made that motion, Amber?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Raj. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And so the other set?
I'll make a motion to approve the April 14th minutes with the following amendments. This was a trustee meeting, not a select board meeting, that was held on Wednesday. So it's all in the header. My name is misspelled throughout the entire document with the exception of the first part. And I think that's it.
Okay. Kathy, do you have what you need, or do you need anything more specific?
No, I've got it, thank you.
Any, so you made that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Raj. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. I think that's the end of our business. And on to consent.
I move we accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Amber. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great. Reading file, board member comments. Anybody have anything you want to talk about at 10:11 at night?
No.
Evan, staff, anything from you? All right. Lovely. We have no other executive sessions. If someone wants to make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I think Dan had that one.
Give it to Dan. Second.
Dan's, all right, Raj has a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Great. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us.
Good night, everybody, thank you.
Take care.
Good night. Thanks to the public for coming out.
Yeah, very much so.
Take care.